You guys, welcome. I am so excited about today's guest. Her name is Natasha Evans, and she is a fertility nutritionist. She is the founder of the Fertility 360 method, 9 steps to 9 months, which is a holistic 360-degree approach to optimizing your fertility. She works with couples to help them find a more natural diet and lifestyle to optimize their chances of conceiving naturally and preparing for the IVF process so it is successful. She also works with individuals who are preparing for egg and sperm freezing or surrogacy and fertility-related conditions such as PCOS and endometriosis. Natasha, thank you so much and welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today. Tell us more about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. And that was a great introduction. There's not a huge amount I'd add to that, but yeah, it's such a pleasure to be invited here to talk to you today. As you said, I am a registered nutritional therapist and my specialism is fertility, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about today. It's a fascinating topic. And I know we're going to be talking probably mostly about Women's Day, but I'm a big fan of working with a couple because ultimately two people make a baby. And I think there's been so much emphasis on female fertility over the years, but actually male fertility is in a bit of a crisis as well at the moment. So I'm so passionate about helping my clients on their fertility journey because ultimately I think if someone has a baby at the end of the day, there's just no greater feeling for them and also for me as their practitioner. So yeah, great to be here.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's get down to it because I have so many questions. And this is, like you said, such a fascinating topic. I am super fascinated by it. I don't have any children. And being in my late 30s, it's such a realization that, wow, this really could be a situation that if I wanted children could be a problem for me. So, why is it important for people to educate themselves and care about their fertility health to begin with, especially if they want to have a family one day?
Yeah, it's so interesting because so many women we know, so I know and you know, will spend some time getting in shape for their wedding or something like that. And I say that in inverted commas, often crash dieting and it's not very healthy at all. But very few people think about actually optimizing their diet for fertility. It's still not really on anyone's radar. I think it slowly is a bit more. But we rely on our diet to get nutrients into the body to fuel every single process in the body. So whether it's repair, DNA synthesis, whether it's manufacturing hormones, whether it's building a baby, we rely on nutrients from our diet to do this. And whilst we can manufacture some nutrients alone, we are still largely relying on our diet. So basically, it's like, a machine. You put in inputs and you get an output. And the better the inputs, the better the output. So whether it's fertility, whether it's another aspect of your health, diet is absolutely crucial. And I really want to encourage people to really start thinking about optimizing their diet and their lifestyle for fertility, because ultimately I see fertility as being a proxy of your overall health during your reproductive years. And most people will be aware now that diet is a really core part of our health. So really, that's why it's so important for fertility as well.
That makes so much sense. And I think, yeah, like you said, diet has been an undervalued source of optimizing our health in general. And it is interesting because I think, having children is such a responsibility. And in my mind, if I was going to get pregnant, I would want to make sure that not only the like the egg quality is great, or what you're feeding your body and putting into your body before pregnancy and during pregnancy only makes sense for people to do. So it's really amazing that you are educating people on this, because you ideally want to create the healthiest child that you can make, right, and set it off in the beginning for the most optimal health throughout the child's life anyways. So yeah, that's an amazing factor. But
Exactly. It's not just, as you say, it's not just about optimizing your chance of conceiving. It's about having a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby at the end of the day. And actually, we know now that the maternal health can actually influence their grandchildren's health, because a grandchild already exists in the mother's womb, which is
So
wild.
crazy. Yeah.
And I think as well, what's so interesting about female fertility is that you're born with all the eggs you're ever going to have. So actually, and the egg is actually it's one of the largest cells in the body. And secondly, it is very sensitive to its environment. So unlike men who produce new sperm every 3 months, women, well, actually, they're producing new sperm every single day, and then they're getting rid of it after about 3 months. Women, have these eggs in them from birth, and that means we're at a bit of a disadvantage there, because it means our eggs, the quality of our eggs, is very much a reflection of our whole life up until now. So if you were a big drinker as a teenager or in your 20s, if you took loads of drugs, if you didn't get much sleep, if you did all these things, which to be honest, most of us did, that's all going to be impacting your egg quality today, which is absolutely wild. But the reassuring thing around that is that actually eggs are most sensitive to nutrient levels in the 3 months prior to ovulation. So there's a lot you can do today to really optimize your egg quality when it comes to ovulation in 3 months' time.
Wow, that's so good to know too, because I think about it as from a genetic standpoint too, because your body will ultimately be creating the genes. And like you said, the drugs that you take, the smoking, you could potentially be harvesting an egg inside your body that is has been exposed to all these drugs as well, which then, like, how are you going to, that's not setting up your child or your baby to be the healthiest it could be under those conditions and exposed to all those toxins. So is there a chance that even if you did all that stuff and didn't get enough sleep and did very unhealthy habits throughout your lifestyle, that the quality could improve and be better even if you start today?
Yeah. No, you can improve your egg quality, which is really cool. So the best time to start was yesterday, or even 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. And this is why when I normally start seeing clients, I often say to them, take trying to conceive off the table for the next 3 months whilst we work together. Sometimes they can be a little bit alarmed by that. Sometimes they can feel very relieved because they've been trying for so long, and actually it's great to take the pressure off. Because actually we really want to work on optimizing that egg quality and the sperm quality in those 3 months. And then when you start trying again, you're going to be in a much better position. So yes, you can improve egg quality. You can slow and potentially even reverse ovarian aging. So there's plenty you can do. And also we all know that, I think that on the other layer on top of that, so firstly that we have autonomy, we are empowered to actually change our egg quality. But also on top of that, the other layer is that unpredictability to fertility, which we can't control. So we'll all know one of our best friends who is an absolute party girl or something, who had no trouble conceiving whatsoever. And then you've got your other friend who is incredibly healthy and is having loads of issues conceiving. So there are so many layers to this. But yes, ultimately, I think that preconception phase is really important.
So true. And I absolutely identify with knowing the party girl who never wanted to get pregnant, who had or just, thought she was done with children and just had a surprise after major, like, preventative measures, let's just say. And then other friends who, really want to have multiple children and have had such issues getting pregnant and less damage, I guess, or harm to their bodies through what they were intaking. But you mentioned before, I don't want to leave out men, because I have so many questions about men as well, and sperm quality. So I guess let's just even out the playing field here and let's talk about men's sperm quality. I know nothing about this. So what are some things that could happen or prevent men or cause men to be the one who might have who's contributing to
Yeah.
the infertility process?
Yeah. So the first thing I would just say here is infertility is on the rise, which is really
Yeah.
scary, because we thought trying to have a baby would be the easiest thing in the world, and actually most of us women have tried all our lives not to get pregnant. So when it actually comes the time when you want to get pregnant, it's quite common now, which is interesting. And the research shows that actually infertility is 50% female factor, 50% male factor. So even though, like, the NHS, most of the tests that run will be on the woman, and that, the man is barely getting any attention, it's 50% likely to be something on the male side. And the other thing we're battling with is a massive decrease in sperm counts over the years. So sperm counts are down by about 50% since the 1970s, which is really significant. And the data suggests that if it continues along the same trajectory, men will be infertile by 2045. And the
Wow.
likelihood is that isn't going to happen. We think, it's probably going to flatten out, because if you think about how much the world has changed since the 1970s, it's unprecedented. We are more sedentary than we were before. We're exposed to more toxins than we were before. We're eating an ultra processed diet. We're living in a polluted world where, all these things that are just totally unnatural, that's having a significant impact in sperm quality. I don't think we're going to see that same, massive change in our society in the next 40 years necessarily. So I think it's, the likelihood is it's going to flatten out, but it's terrifying, because that 50%, that is really significant. And I see it in my clients' test results as well. And not only that, but the normal semen parameters have changed a lot over the years to accommodate this decrease in sperm quality. So now, for example, you only need to have 4% of sperm being the normal classic sperm shape to be considered normal, only 4%. Which seem, the rest could have multiple heads. They could have squiggly tails. They could have, long, thin heads, which basically aren't the optimal or normal sperm. The normal range for sperm count has decreased a lot over the years. So this is kind of like the new normal. And men have an advantage here because, as I say, they're producing loads of new sperm every single day. And we also know, again, that it takes 3 months for sperm to mature. So a man's current diet and lifestyle will be affecting his sperm quality in 3 months' time. So again, this gives them so much to work with. If they start improving their health right now, they'll see an improvement in their sperm quality in 3 months' time. And this is seen across the board, unless there's something sort of structurally wrong down there. All of my clients see improvements in their semen parameters within 3 months. And it's the same things that affect egg quality, really. It's diet, it's sleep, it's stress, it's movement, it's heat around the testicles. It's toxic exposure. We've got so many studies now on like microplastics and BPA and pollution, and even things like phthalates, parabens, all these things that are now in our modern day environment, how they can affect sperm health as well. So there's so much we can do to try and manipulate that and improve sperm health.
Wow, there's so much information there, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to ask first. So there is, let's talking about men, there is this like general misconception, I think, that men can have children until they're like in their 70s and women are the only ones on this biological clock. But everything that you just said really proves that that's not even true, because there is a factor of quality both for men and women, in which I've learned through going through looking into doing egg freezing for myself, that you may have 15 eggs or you may have like a really high sperm count, but the quality of that to actually be successful in creating a baby, there could be all sorts of defects which could cause a pregnancy, you'd have a miscarriage because the actual fetus is not going to be able to survive health wise through the process of birth and be a healthy child. And then you might have not be able to conceive because one or the other or both doesn't have good quality of material to make a child, which I didn't even consider a factor. And I was one to believe that men could just have children, into their 70 and they never have issues. So this is really enlightening to understand that men might be on a biological clock just as much as women are, and able, if they ever want to have a child, because and these days most people don't start having children till they're in their later 30s and maybe even early 40s, which could potentially be affecting the numbers that we're seeing in the decrease of fertility in general.
Totally. So there's definitely a biological clock for men too. From the age of about 35, the sperm health in general starts to decrease unless you're doing something about it. And from the age of about 40, the risk of having a child with things like schizophrenia and other conditions increases quite significantly. So men can also freeze their sperm, but it's rarely talked about. And it's actually relatively inexpensive compared to egg freezing, which costs an arm and a leg. So any man who's younger and knows they're going to be putting it off for a while, it's probably quite a good idea to freeze a sperm, but only if your current diet and lifestyle is actually good, because otherwise the sperm you're freezing might actually be quite bad quality. So yes, there's definitely, and just because, and the thing is, we all know about these celebrities having babies when they're in their 80s and 70s and 80s. So yes, men can reproduce pretty much till the end of their lives. However, it doesn't mean they should. It's actually quite irresponsible for the health of the child. And your chances of conceiving are much lower as you get older as well as a man, unless you're doing these things to really try and mitigate the natural aging of cells that happens as you get older.
That's so fascinating, Natasha. I'm just so happy we're having this conversation right now because it's really going to educate people on this topic. And people who may not be sure yet if they even want to be a parent, for several reasons, it's good to have this information to be more educated and informed on whether or not to freeze or to consider the nutritional and all the other factors that influence whether or not you might wake up one day when you're 40 and say, I want to have a kid, and didn't think you did when you were in your early 30s. So it's great. So, I want to talk about what challenges you see couples and individuals face when they actually try to have a baby, because I actually know some people now who have been trying to have a baby for like a year and have tried different things. Like, you could get your tubes flushed. So, maybe what are some things that you have seen in your practice with couples that you've helped
Mm.
them with?
So essentially, what are some of the common issues I see in people experiencing infertility?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so the way I practice is I use what's called a functional medicine approach in my clinic, which is all about trying to find the underlying root cause of what's going on. So the tests that the NHS only runs tests on you after you've had 12 months of trying to conceive. And again, it might not sound like a huge amount of time, but if you're trying to conceive, 12 months feels like a really long time. It's quite disheartening, to be honest. That's 12 periods you've had, and every time you get a period, that feeling of anguish is really quite significant. And so the stress just continues to build and build over that year. So then you finally get, some testing done at the NHS. It'll normally be mostly on the woman, and it won't be very extensive at all. So lots of people now are diagnosed with something called unexplained infertility, and that in itself is another horrible slap in the face for someone who's been trying to conceive for a year, because like what can I do? So when I see people with unexplained infertility, I do run or even people who've got some explanations. We run way more tests. So, for example, one thing that's coming up quite a lot at the moment is imbalances in the vaginal microbiome and the semen microbiome. So, for example, I worked with a couple recently who have already had a first child. They've been trying to conceive the second child for 2 years, done a couple of rounds of IVF, and they failed. Then they decided to come and see me. They were like, let's try something different here. We ran lots of tests, and they were very patient. Bless them. They really wanted to have a child. It was very stressful, but they were very patient with all this testing coming back. And what we found is that they both had an infection there was an infection in the vaginal microbiome and in the semen microbiome. Because if you think about it, if they're having sex and they're exchanging all these bodily fluids, they're both going to be influencing each other. So we got them both treated for that. And immediately after, they conceived, and they're now in the just gone into the second trimester, I believe. So, happy days, and they conceived naturally without IVF.
Amazing. Yeah. I actually had two friends that happened to, where they had like a bacterial infection that was preventing them from conceiving. So amazing.
There you go. And yet, when I'm always in conversation with the GP and the IVF clinics and stuff. IVF clinics, they understand the vaginal microbiome, most of them, when you show them the results, but they don't know what to do with it. But the GPs often, when you show them the vaginal microbiome test results, they don't know what it is. And but there are just so many answers there. So I think the microbiome is a really interesting and area, and we often find answers in there. Because it's really like the vaginal microbiome, for example, is really going to affect the ability for an embryo to implant in the vaginal wall. And then further down the line can really affect your risk of miscarriage, having a healthy pregnancy. And then if you have a natural birth, the baby gets coated in the vaginal microbiome on the way out. So it's literally setting up their immune system from day zero. So making sure that's looking optimal is so, so key. Another thing I would mention is that I'm seeing so many people coming to me at the moment who are plant-based. And I am very respectful of people's decisions to have a certain diet. And if there's no flexibility in changing that, then we work with what we've got, and that's okay. But I think because there's been so much messaging in the past few years about how meat is bad for you and plants are good for you and you need to eat more plants and it's bad for the environment to eat meat and all these messages coming in. So many people come to me now and they're barely eating any meat. And the issue with this is that meat is so meat sources, whether it's offal, whether it's red meat, whether it's fish as well. It's like, shellfish, oily fish, normal fish, eggs, all of these things are so nutrient dense for female and male fertility. And if you're not thinking about the nutrients you're losing from taking those out of the diet and adding those back in through supplementation and also really crafting a healthy plant-based diet, then, you might be screwed. And furthermore, with genetics, I've tested my whole genetics, for example, and I can see that if I were on a vegan diet, I would not do well on that at all. I have a much higher need for things like vitamin A, B vitamins, iron, zinc, things that basically you need to get from animal or fish sources. So it's a huge genetic variation here. And this is why we know some vegans who have had no issues conceiving and have very healthy babies. But this blanket statement that everyone would do better on a plant-based diet is just not good. And actually, I think around the fertility piece, like red meat or meat in general, I think it's so important. If you're not having it, we really need to think about that supplementation to plug those gaps.
Such great information. I definitely want to get back to the genetic factor and that I think epigenetics I've heard you speak on before. But just for listeners who don't know, talking about just the medical community in general, I think to give people hope in case they are struggling with this and their doctors are telling them, oh, well, like, sorry, IVF's your only option. That's the only alternative. You just can't conceive or you're not able to have a baby, that there are other resources out there like yourself. But just for people listening in America too, the NHS is the public healthcare system here, which would be, the first line that you would go to your general practitioner and, we get to choose who our doctors are in the US, and you don't really get the same option in most cases here. So just that little tidbit of info for people. Going back to having other options, I had a friend, actually two of my friends that were having issues getting pregnant. They were struggling a lot. One was preparing to do IVF, and the other had a bacterial infection. I told you, and she got on antibiotics, and they basically before this told her that she had no eggs. There's no way she would ever conceive. She had one child, and it was a very difficult pregnancy. And they told her, "Oh, sorry, you're done." And then she ended up taking care of her fertility health, looking for alternate options, taking some antibiotics for whatever was going on for her, and she had a baby totally fine, like totally normal pregnancy. And then the other friend too ended up, before she started IVF again, had some other options that she looked into, and she ended up getting pregnant naturally. So there is hope if anyone out there is struggling, and you just have to take your own health into your own hands sometimes and not just let a doctor tell you what is possible for you. I think you need to get second and third opinions and be open to alternative methods, which is exactly what you do and offer for people. So
Just to pick up on that point as well, you're right. So basically, if they can't find anything after 12 months, you're referred to IVF. There's no other solution. And I think IVF is like an unbelievable process. It's amazing what we can do there. But I would encourage anyone who's on that journey, just like to give yourself a break for 3 months, really optimize your health, work with someone, or maybe you're already conscious of some of the things that aren't aligned health wise and you need to optimize yourself. So really work on those 3 months, take trying to conceive off the table, then start trying again, maybe for up to 6 months or something like that. If you have no success, then go down the IVF route. And then regardless, either way, whether you're able to conceive naturally or not, you have improved your potential success outcomes for IVF as well. So whichever, it's going to support either conceiving naturally or it's going to support better success outcomes for IVF. And you'll be in better health in general, and you would have learned a lot about yourself in the process too.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think diet can really affect not only like your energy levels, just the quality of the pregnancy and how you feel throughout it. Just making those changes that you just mentioned could be the difference in you having a really difficult and challenging pregnant physically, mentally, emotionally versus having a quote unquote easier one. So, thank you. And you had mentioned, I heard you speak about epigenetics. And so let's go through basically the process that you send people through as far as blood work goes, looking at their genes. Tell us more about that and what is possible through the work that you do with people in that aspect.
Thank you for asking about that, because I'm so passionate about it. And I don't do genetic testing with everyone, but whenever I see a client, I try and deem whether it's necessary. So, for example, if they've had a really complicated fertility journey, no answers so far. If they've had recurrent miscarriage, if they are plant-based at the moment, we want to try and figure out whether it's the right diet for them, and we need a bit more data. Then I think genetic testing is amazing. So it's not always necessary, but if people also have the budget, I just say, just go for it. This is going to genetic testing really tells you not just about, doesn't just help us personalize the plan around fertility, but also it really helps you understand how your body might age and what you can do to try and slow that down and really support yourself for optimal health in the future. So genetic testing actually uses a cheek swab. And the cool thing about genetic testing is that you only need to do it once. You never need to do it again because your genes don't change. But what can change, and this is why I think studying the genes is so empowering, because some people might look at their test report and freak out. But what's so empowering about it is that once you know what's going on in your DNA, then you know how to manipulate that, switch genes on and off. And that's the study of epigenetics. So your genes load the gun, your environment pulls the trigger. So genes are a really important piece of the puzzle. It kind of basically it's sort of what you're set up with for life. But everything that's happened since, your whole history to date, your environment, your lifestyle, your sleep, your stress, your diet, how much trauma you might have experienced in the past, all of these things affect how your genes are expressed. And it empowers us to know how we can really use this to your advantage. So, for example, if I hadn't I've done specific training in nutrigenomics, which is the study of using nutrition and lifestyle to really manipulate your genes. And when I got my full report back, if I didn't know anything about it, I would have lost my mind. I saw I have a higher risk of getting cancer and, Alzheimer's. I'm at a much higher risk of having, I'm at a higher risk of being pro-inflammatory, having more oxidative stress, having fertility issues. And I think that was a really interesting thing to see because my mum had loads of miscarriages. And so I haven't started trying to conceive yet, but I know I've seen that in the data now. I am predisposed to having miscarriages in general, but now I know how I can try and prevent that as much as possible. So yes, someone might have freaked out when they saw my results, but actually, when now I know that, firstly, so much makes sense about my current state of health and maybe some of the little niggles and the things that might affect me every now and then. So, for example, anxiety, I think I sort of lean on the anxious side of things. And then I saw in my genetic report that I break down GABA really quickly. So you'll know what GABA is, but for everyone else, it's kind of like the anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. And I make it okay, but actually I break it down really quickly. So I really need to support my GABA and make sure I'm slow down that breakdown of GABA. So things like lemon balm, rosemary, thyme, those are all really nice for that. So I'm growing all of those in my allotment at the moment. So I think it's so empowering, and it's something called methylation. There's a process called methylation that's particularly important for fertility. And I think that's another really great report to do for anyone who wants to understand how they're going to age. I think it's one of the key processes that affects that.
Yeah, and methylation is just how your body releases or like kind of cleans itself, your cells, right? Or breaks down the proteins or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is about methylation that it affects so many different things. It's made up of 5 different cycles, and it's happening billions of times every second, in every single one of our cells. And so it influences our detoxification, which is obviously very important. It influences our neurotransmitter balance. It influences our how much oxidative stress we produce and how we break it down. It influences how inflammatory our body is. It influences our DNA synthesis and repair, which is so important for fertility. So it influences so many different things, and that's one of the reasons why it's one of the most potentially the most important process in the body, and most people have never heard of it. And I think so. Loads of the longevity doctors and the longevity, influence and stuff like that at the moment are really talking about methylations. It's really becoming a hot topic, and it plays such a significant role in fertility. So you probably heard, for example, about how the NHS recommends folic acid for pregnancy and preconception. Methylation plays a significant role in how well your body is able to use folic acid. So I'm actually much more in the using folate or methylfolate camp, because actually so many people struggle to use synthetic folic acid, and methylation plays a massive role in that. So for example, when I look at my genes and I see that I've got serious downregulation in my folate cycle, which is part of methylation. If I took folic acid, it probably wouldn't even touch the sides for me. I have to take folate or methylfolate, and that's going to give me the best chance of reducing my risk of miscarriage, and supporting my overall health.
Wow, that's so helpful. Thank you for sharing that information with us because, yeah, I've heard about it, but I don't know everything about methylation, obviously, but I know it's a very important process in the body for detoxification. That's the word I was looking for before. So that's interesting and really cool that you do that because that, again, can have such an effect on someone's ability to conceive and also fight disease. So even if you're not looking to get pregnant, it's helpful to understand that anyways, and look at your genes for overall health in general and maybe help, like you said, if you're predisposed to Alzheimer's or any other type of diseases or degenerative processes in the body, you're able to do something to maybe lessen the chance that you will end up with that disease.
Yeah, totally.
So Natasha, you mentioned how to have healthy egg quality, doctors recommend using folic acid and prenatal vitamins and things like that. So, can you maybe talk more about supplements? Because I know that's a huge market right now and it could be a big marketing scheme. Some supplements are better quality than others. Can you explain more about that and how it relates to health and disease prevention as well?
Yeah, totally. So I think we all have this romantic idea that we could get everything from our food and we don't need supplements. And I love the idea of that, being a nutritionist and, being well versed in diet and food. Having said that, the food we eat today is not the same food that we ate hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, even decades ago. And so now what we're dealing with soils that are really depleted of nutrients. That's affecting the quality of the plants that we eat. We're seeing factory farmed animals, which are much higher in inflammatory fats rather than nice, good quality fats. So the quality of the food we're eating is so decreased now that actually it's quite hard to get the nutrients in from diet alone. And I really think supplementation can really help to plug the gap here. Also, we are dealing with chronic stress as a nation, as a population. It's no longer these acute stresses that we used to deal with, that we've been designed to deal with. Now it's this chronic low grade stress. And what stress is a very energy intensive process, and it depletes nutrients in the body. So another reason why we really need to bump up our nutrient stores a little bit more. Add to that the fact that people are waiting to start trying to conceive later and later in life, which, is for multifactorial, and I totally get it. But we really need to support our cellular health more as we get older, support our mitochondrial health, which naturally slows as we get older as well. So this is why I think supplements are so useful to add in, not just for the fertility picture, but also the overall health picture. So, in terms of which supplements are actually useful for people, this is where it gets really complicated, because we've all seen studies where supplements might have worked for some reason, and then another study where a supplement doesn't work. And then, there are so many reasons for that. The first one is that there's a huge variation in the quality of supplements out there. And it seems like a new supplement brand's launched every day. How do you know if it's good or not? It might be really good marketing, really fancy packaging, all these things. And then also, different forms of nutrients have a different effect in the body. So, for example, taking magnesium glycinate is quite an expensive form of magnesium, but it's very well utilized by the body. Magnesium oxide is the most commonly used magnesium in supplements because it's really cheap, and the body doesn't really know what to do with it. Very little of it is actually absorbed. So the form is really important. And the third element is this real sort of personalized aspect. And this is where the epigenetics comes in again. So a supplement might work for one person and not for another person, and the genes is likely to have quite a big role in this. So, for example, as I said, from looking at my genetic report, I know I'm naturally going to be a bit more pro-inflammatory than someone else. Curcumin, which is in turmeric, we all know that's a lovely anti-inflammatory. It's very popular now. And for me, I know, looking at my whole genome, that it's going to work well for me. It's not going to cause any issues. But for another person, if they have a SNP or a mutation on another gene called COMT, then actually taking curcumin could be quite bad for them, because COMT also breaks down estrogen, it breaks down neurotransmitters, and curcumin slows down that breakdown. So this is why curcumin might be great for one person, but it might not be great for the next person. And so supplements, you could be throwing a lot of money down the drain with them. Firstly, by buying rubbish quality supplements. Secondly, by buying not the right ones for you as an individual. And also, so it could be doing absolutely nothing. And worst case scenario, it could be doing more harm than good. So this is where I think that personalized support is super important. And also, if you are trying these things on yourself, I would only ever try introducing one supplement at a time and just seeing how your body responds to it, maybe for 2 or 3 months or so. And, if you notice any negative reactions, don't add in loads of supplements at the same time, because otherwise you don't know what's causing what. But it's good to just try things one by one and see where you get to. And the other thing I'd say is probably not buying supplements from Amazon. There was a study that was released a few years ago that looked at what was in Amazon supplements, and it found that the vast majority of them had ingredients in there that weren't stated on packs, like additives, fillers, all that kind of thing. And lots of them also didn't even contain what they were said they were supposed to contain in there too. So this is why quality is so important. And if you try supplementation, you think, oh, it doesn't work, it might be because you're not buying the right supplements.
And that's a frightening thought that is available and happening. It's basically false advertising and poisoning people with supplements that are supposed to help them. That's
Yeah, it's unregulated, the supplement industry. And on the one hand, that's good because it means we can try and learn about it and try and take control of our health by doing supplements rather than medicines, for example. And
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of medicine as well in its own respect. But, we can actually try and influence our health in a more natural way. But the other thing is that we actually often don't know what we're taking. So, it's in a way, I mean, it should definitely be more regulated.
Absolutely. And what came to mind too, as you were just explaining, that is another reason to work with someone like yourself who is well versed in everything that you are, is the fact that I know I had a friend that's a clinical dietitian, and she told me when I had really high estrogen at one point, and I was working with an integrative medicine doctor to regulate my hormones. And she told me that sometimes you don't know why you have a high estrogen. It just could be that your body is not, like, your liver might be to needs to be detoxed. So therefore it's causing a backup of estrogen in your body, basically, so your body's not filtering certain things out of it. So I think it's really interesting because, you mentioned so many different reasons why something could happen. If you just get like that one opinion from the doctor saying, oh, you have, high estrogen, oh, just take some testosterone or progesterone, whatever they might recommend, it might not even help or be the best route to get your hormones imbalanced, because it could be a different issue that's actually causing that they haven't mentioned to you.
Definitely. And so one really controversial one, for example, is HRT for menopause. And some people respond really well to it, some people don't. And I've looked at my genetic report and I can see that I'm going to be a good responder to that. And it's unlikely to cause breast cancer, like increase my risk of breast cancer or something like that. So yeah, but unfortunately, the NHS doesn't have the resources, the education around this sort of testing, the money to fund tests like this to actually give that really personalized protocol. But really interesting around the estrogen, because the COMT gene I mentioned, that's the main one, that's a big one that affects your ability to detoxify estrogen from the body. So if I see anyone who's sort of estrogen dominant, which is often an endometriosis type picture or something like that, very interested to know what goes on with the COMT gene. I don't know if you've got any friends with endometriosis, but yeah, it's really common these days, isn't it? And it takes so long to diagnose. But there's a huge genetic element to endometriosis. And it's not like there's an endometriosis gene, but actually it's a combination of different genes. So we know there are over 100 genes now which have been associated with endometriosis. So it might be that, again, like me, you might be more predisposed to inflammation, and endometriosis is an inflammatory condition. You might have the SNPs and the COMT gene, which affects, which makes you more likely to have an estrogen dominance, which can affect endometriosis. So it's all this, like, it's a really interesting combination of things. And I think that's another great way to use the genetic testing.
Amazing. And then that is actually one topic that I wanted to cover with you that we didn't get to yet, was just the different conditions. Like you mentioned PCOS as something that you see a lot with women, and then endometriosis. So maybe can we just kind of touch on what is PCOS and what is endometriosis exactly, and then maybe some things that you see common in men, if anything, that could pop up and be causing issues with not just fertility, but just their overall health, and what you work to help people improve.
Yeah, sure. So PCOS is incredibly common now. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, it's normally accompanied by high testosterone in women. And I think so. There are so many interesting areas of investigation here. And again, one person's cause of PCOS might be completely different from the next person's. But some common things we see, firstly, some insulin resistance, which is so common these days, but high carbohydrate, high sugar diets. So getting your meals more blood sugar balanced can be that can make all the difference with PCOS. The genes also play quite an interesting part here, because our genes influence how our bodies produce testosterone, which could be playing a part in the PCOS side of things as well. There's a huge stress element to PCOS and endometriosis too. So endometriosis is where tissue that normally lines the uterus starts to grow outside of the uterus, and it can start to form this really painful scar tissue. And sometimes, in the worst case scenario, that scar tissue can start to appear in other areas of the body too. It's really sad. I mean, it takes on average 10 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis. So women are experiencing awful period pain, pain during sex, really debilitating symptoms, and often being really gaslit by their doctors, saying, it's normal to have these pains, having tests, again, they're coming back negative. And it takes so long to get diagnosed. And again, so many different root causes for this. And the medical approach at the moment still says there's no known cause of endometriosis, and the only solution really is going on the contraceptive pill, which just masks the symptoms, or you can have surgery. But unfortunately, the chance of it reoccurring is quite common, because you're not fixing the underlying root cause of it again. So from a functional medicine perspective, we're thinking about some things that could be driving endometriosis. So toxic exposure is quite a big one, because if we think about so many of these modern day chemicals like BPA and phthalates that have an endocrine disrupting abilities. They mimic estrogen in the body, could be contributing towards that estrogen dominance that might be an underlying root cause of endometriosis. We're thinking about inflammation. We're thinking about potential food sensitivities, which might be driving inflammation. Again, stress is a huge one, poor sleep. So that really holistic approach could really help endometriosis. I have quite a lot of endo clients. And on the male side of things, low testosterone is really common these days. So testosterone affects loads of things. It affects our sperm production. It's also the sort of anti-stress hormone for men. So it's really important to have robust levels, but they're falling by at a population level. They're falling by 1% every year, which cumulatively adds up to a lot. So we're seeing really low testosterone levels. The genes do play a role in testosterone production, as I said, but I think the testosterone thing is more of a lifestyle and environment drop off in testosterone. It's being so sedentary. It's the ultra processed, nutrient poor diet we've got. It's stress, which really suppresses testosterone levels. So many things contributing to that. I think there is one really interesting gene that influences male fertility, and it's the gene that influences nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide really supports blood flow. And if you have a SNP on the nitric oxide gene, then it can really affect blood flow. If you think about blood flow is really needed for erections, but also to the testes to help to produce sperm. It's really important for female fertility as well, because you need loads of blood flow to the womb as well. So thinking about ways to increase nitric oxide production, nasal breathing. It's a really key one. So you produce, I can see you taking a massive breath right now.
Yeah.
So rather than mouth breathing, which unfortunately due to the shape of our skulls now from, eating way softer foods over the years, so many people are mouth breathing now. So nasal breathing, things like pomegranates, beetroots, fantastic. And also moving more just to support blood flow. Most people are now sitting down for 9 hours in the day, sleeping for another 10 hours or whatever. Or maybe, actually, it's way less than that now. But, regular movement, so important.
Yeah, or sitting at a computer for 9 hours and then coming home and sitting on the couch watching TV all night. That's a lot of people's
Yeah.
lifestyle. So just for people to understand, I guess males and females too, what does low testosterone do, not just from like a health level, but does it affect energy levels? Does it make you lower your libido? What are like symptoms like that you associate with low testosterone for men? Because I actually dated someone who had a lower sex drive, definitely because of low testosterone. And then I was getting so mad at him. I remember thinking like I have to keep initiating, or he just had, like I said, a lower sex drive than me. And then once he addressed this issue, things changed. So
Yeah, you're quite right. So lower sex drive, lower confidence, issues with erectile function, higher stress levels, difficulty gaining muscle, and muscle gain is also great for supporting testosterone. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle there. So many things there. And I think what's really interesting as well is that lots of sometimes in the whole sort of feminist movement in general, and of course I'm a feminist myself, but sometimes people really say testosterone is bad, like, oh, a high testosterone environment. Well, actually men really need testosterone, and it's, as I say, it's like an anti-stress hormone for them. So that's actually really good to have testosterone, like healthy testosterone levels. It's a sign of good health in a man. So it's a great thing to test actually every year if you are a man. Really easy finger prick test you can do just to test your testosterone levels. So that's just a key marker of your health.
thank you for sharing that. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to say that, of course, being healthy can be expensive, right? Like you said, going to the specialist, buying the foods and the supplements and everything that you might need, getting the tests done. Is there anything that people can start doing on their own? Or, I know we'll get into what services you offer, but is there anything someone can do today aside from, stop smoking and eating cake all day long that they can do to maybe help themselves be
Yeah.
healthier?
I know we really take for granted some of the free natural biohacks, I guess. So getting 8 hours sleep per night if you can. If you're struggling with sleep, then yeah, really think about why you're struggling with sleep. If it's something related to stress, then maybe it's about introducing a new practice to really support your stress levels. So getting good sleep, getting outside more often to really support your circadian rhythm, which is going to help your sleep as well. But also the circadian rhythm influences what every single cell in your body is doing at a particular time. So it has a systemic effect on your health. So getting outside as much as possible, if you have to prioritize first thing in the morning, I mean, that's one of the best things anyone can do for their health, and it's free. Cutting out blue light in the evening, wearing blue light blockers, again, great for circadian rhythm. So that will cost you a little bit of money, or just turn the screens off. What else is completely free? It's community, spending time in community, preferably not drinking very much because it's not great for your fertility. But that is, incredible free thing you can do. Getting out into nature. So many things you can do. And then I think on the diet side of things, the first thing I do is to try and pay attention to how much ultra processed food you've got in your diet and seeing if you can get that down. And so many people I see now are really time poor. So they're working corporate jobs. Those are the people I tend to work with. Working corporate jobs, they're straight out the door in the morning. So I really get them to do more food prep, more batch cooking, which is actually much more cost effective as well. And if you've got healthy food there in the fridge for you, you're more likely to make a healthy decision when you're really, stuck for time, basically. So there are so many free resources online now. So just hop on YouTube, look up fertility yoga. That's such a nice one for really supporting blood flow to the womb. It's very different to normal yoga. I think fertility yoga is really amazing, actually. Look up breath work you can do to really support and calm down your nervous system, but look for the ones that are properly calming for the nervous system rather than the ones that could be another stressor on the body. And then, yeah, meditation, looking at all these things on YouTube that are all completely at our fingertips now. And yeah, really nice free things you can do at home.
Amazing. And then, Natasha, if someone wants to work with you, maybe tell us a little bit about exactly what services and how people can work with you in any capacity.
Yeah, sure. So, as I say, I specialize in fertility. So, I'm largely working with couples who are trying to conceive, but also individuals undergoing egg or sperm freezing, or individuals with a fertility related condition like PCOS or endometriosis. And we either do 6-week programs or 3-month programs. Either way, whichever one you go for, I normally recommend doing that 3 months of really optimizing your health before trying to conceive again or undergoing fertility treatment. I then also support my clients through pregnancy. So I do pregnancy programs and then also the 4th trimester as well, which is really important to help my clients really replenish nutrient levels after birth as well. So I support them throughout that whole journey. And yeah, if you want to find me, my website is www.anynutrition.co.uk. Instagram is @anynutrition.
Perfect. And we will put that in the show notes for everyone to see and get in touch with you. Natasha, it's been so informative and such a pleasure being educated by you today. I really appreciate your time again. And thank you so much for sharing.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.